Okay. Haven't done a video in a long time. Figured today was a good opportunity to, sort of try it on again, see what it's like to express myself in front of the camera, and just to see where it goes, how it flows, and specifically, one of the ideas that I had just discussed with a friend of mine is the idea of unhappiness as an identity, and why often we're like more comfortable choosing unhappiness as an identity instead of happiness. And I mean, at its root, like, it's a pretty simple idea, behind it, but let's see if I can actually put it into words that are comprehensible, because it's I don't know, I often have a hard time expressing ideas because I get hung up on different layers of the onion, and then I'll want to express like two things at the same time, but they because they're both important nuances to cover, but I have to figure out which one do I want to put ahead in line of what is the more important thing that I want to point out. So unhappiness, why do people feel more comfortable with an identity of unhappiness than an identity of happiness? Well, I think people feel, they feel more comfortable with their gripes over time, and if they feel like they need to adopt an identity of happiness, they become afraid that their gripes are going to be taken away from them, as if all of a sudden all their boundaries towards the things, the encroachments that have been made against them are suddenly now put into question, well, I won't be allowed to be unhappy anymore in any way if I choose an identity that is sort of like the root, at the fun, one of the values of that identity is, the root values is happiness, because the fear of something being taken away from you, which is the negative emotions, or the things that we call negative emotions. But I think where this fails is that we kind of have to look at unhappiness a little bit differently. That unhappiness is not actually a specific emotion. It's a decision about a category, a larger category of emotions that are now labeled under the umbrella of unhappiness. So if you ask a person, what are they feeling, and they're saying, well, I feel unhappy, that's a vague descriptor. And what they're really feeling is more specific than that. But the reason that the term unhappiness is being used is specifically to distance themselves from this more specific experience that they feel is threatening to them, if they allow that to be more fully in focus, and specifically because that experience is somehow linked to vulnerability, or something probably from childhood where the person felt like they were punished in some way for having a specific kind of feeling. And so, the unhappiness is sort of like the person who chooses an unhappy identity chooses that identity so that they can sort of hold on to the emotions, but keep them out of focus and at a distance. And they're sort of like saying that they don't want to fully put into focus things that are frightening and too overwhelming for them. And now I'm trying to, get back to like why do people choose unhappiness as an identity more comfortably than happiness? And it's sort of like because they're afraid that unhappiness will be taken away from them. But see, the thing is the unhappy, when you fully allow yourself to feel what it is that you feel, even if it's under a negative category, if nothing feels better, nothing feels happier than feeling whatever it is that we feel, that we happen to feel, in the moment as we feel it. So people are afraid to feel what they feel. And so the unhappiness category is sort of like a place that is like a waiting room. It's like we say, well, I'm predominantly an unhappy person. It's sort of like I'm a person who has all of these emotions in storage that don't feel safe to be expressed. But I don't want to give that up. I don't want to give up on, those things that I have in my treasure trunk of unhappiness. So I'm going to claim unhappiness as my primary experience, because what I really want in life is to someday be in a situation where I'm allowed to fully experience the emotions that are backed up in my system. But the reality is that there's a great deal of joy in the fully felt expression of those feelings. So it's not really unhappiness. But where this is problematic is the unhappy identity is part of the problem. Because it's part of what is, it's a vague statement. It's a vague category for a purpose. It's vague because we don't want the things that are frightening to us to be too specific, because then they remind us of how we felt, weak and inadequate to deal with our circumstances at some period in the past. So it's like both a way. So unhappiness is both a way of maintaining some state, maintaining an allegiance to unexpressed, unfelt emotions, unfully felt emotions, but also a way of saying, I don't want to feel those feelings right now, specifically. So I'm going to remain unhappy in order to keep things out of focus, because I don't want those things to, be too vivid for me to fully have to go into some sort of reliving of those events that is going to be too terrifying for me. But so as a juxtaposition to an identity of happiness, see, when people think of an identity of happiness, they're not thinking of someone who's genuinely happy. They're thinking of someone who's masking happiness, and they're pushing down their negative emotions. So people feel well, I'm more emotionally honest because I'm more comfortable with an unhappy identity, because unhappiness is somehow more real than fake happiness. But actually, if you look at the logic, fake unhappiness is just as easily achieved as fake happiness. They're both equally emotionally disingenuous. So, a real identity of happiness is somebody who is not daunted by their own inner experience, and they're able to fully give themselves to the feelings that they have in their life and look at them not in a sort of objectified way that makes them sort of stand at a distance from their feeling experience. Like, this is me and these are my feelings. No, it's more like you're allowing yourself to be unified in your experience, and you're not subject object oriented with your experience. You sort of allow your experience to stand on its own and not at a distance like dirty socks, that you don't want to claim as, as yourself. Because dirty socks, we often treat our own emotions like dirty socks because it's like we're embarrassed about, our smelly, dirty socks. But, if we, to push this metaphor further, if we become more comfortable with our smelly, dirty socks, then we don't, and we're wearing dirty, smelly socks, and we say, hey, I'm wearing dirty, smelly socks. And we're not trying to get everyone, trying to get everyone around us to accommodate that we're somebody who does, has smelly, dirty socks, but won't acknowledge it. And so it's their job to make us, to keep the peace. No one is ever allowed to say, hey, you have dirty socks, please wash them, Then, fuck, I lost my, God damn it. This is the problem with being too, I don't know, whatever. Speculating on things on the fly. But, yeah, so the problem is that you have emotions that, you don't claim as your own, and then you become more you view your emotions as separate from yourself, and so you think that you can put some sort of insulator in between you and your emotions, and then that creates this this identity of unhappiness or a false identity of happiness. But both can be equally false, because the identity of unhappiness isn't an authentic identity. It's a chosen identity to mask certain feelings. So in a way, it's you're still masking, because you're saying these are negative feelings that are not meant for consumption, not meant for emotional normal emotional digestion. They're meant to be kept in a trunk somewhere where I don't have to deal with them. And so choosing the unhappy identity is equally false, because it's not, unhappiness is not experienced as unhappiness in the process of experiencing how you really feel. When you learn to feel what you really feel, then it is experienced as probably a pivotal, often when you finally feel something that you've been putting off, you feel a cathartic sort of experience. So it's profoundly happy to finally acknowledge something that you've been angry or depressed or frightened of, and you finally say, okay, I'm finally allowing myself to feel this anger. I'm finally allowing myself to feel this fear, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about it, because it's totally it's like now you're like choosing to be a little bit more like a grown-up about your feelings, because you're like taking care of what needs to be taken care of inside of yourself, and learning to take stock, and learning to like not, be false one way or the other. And so the happy identity, the genuine happy identity, is one of accepting what we experience emotionally and owning it, and learning to take joy. And every time like something feels uncomfortable, it's sort of like, oh, like this is an opportunity for me to experience something from the past, and now I get to, like, if I look at it and I sort of feel the experience that was sort of natural, I'm sort of able to go back in time and finally make peace in a way that I haven't. And so like uncomfortable feelings, when they arise, they're no longer like, oh, like I'm going to run away from them and I'm going to cling on to this identity of sad person. I'm now able to, like, I'm just, a human being with normal human emotions, and I'm able to just function in a way, non-aggrandized or, subjugated, but just honest and whole, allowing myself to be honest and whole. And that, it doesn't mean, I think, what people think it means. It just means being, essentially, the root of it is just being willing to be truthful and to allow yourself to have the experience that you're actually having, and being willing to look at it, and then, learning to put it into words makes it more, it's always like a victory for me when I learn how to put something into words that was, in a more sort of indistinct form. And the more specific I can express it, the more proud I am of, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what this is. Finally, oh, that makes sense. Now I know myself a little bit better. Anyhow, so, yeah, so that this felt good. I think I'll leave it here. Have a good one.